How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me.
It's nice to have you. And we've been told, or I have lazily said, I would call you Paul B, but your actual name is?
The reason you're calling me Paul B is because it's Bielatowicz. It's a Polish name.
Bielatowicz. Did I get it?
Yes, you did. Yeah.
All right,
yeah.
I got it.
Yeah.
What we're going to do before we start talking to Paul about his music is let you hear a little bit of it. Let's get the clip going. All right, you're back on the Fall River Show with Mark Dion, and you just heard him, guitarist Paul Bielatowicz. Now that I can do it, I'm going to do it like all the time. I'm going to go home and tell my wife, who is part Polish herself, listen to this, honey, Bielatowicz, right? All right, you're a guitarist.
Yeah.
You're appearing here locally.
I am at the Narrows Centre for the Arts in Fall River.
Have you played there before?
I have, lots of times.
That is a great place.
Love it. One of my favourite venues in the world. I've toured all over the world.
I live in town, and we've been there for various bands and solo artists that we like. And it's a very intimate venue.
Yeah.
Very relaxed.
Yeah.
And I think you really, because of the way it is, you always it's sort of like you're in the musician's living room. You know, and they're just kind of just like musicians. Well, they're just sort of jamming. They're just kind of playing. I never get the feeling of a show there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I get that feeling of, these guys are just playing. Cool,
sure,
give me another beer, you know?
Yeah, for sure, yeah. And it is like a living room party almost in terms of, it's bring your own bottle, so people just turn up with coolers around the tables, and it's a fantastic venue, great vibe, and they're all about the music as well at that venue.
And they've done, one of their big advantages is a lot of times they're able to get artists who are playing larger venues in this area who have a down night or two, and rather than earn nothing between their gig in Boston and their gig in Hartford, they'll do a night here.
Yeah.
And that's turned out, I mean, you really get acts down there that you shouldn't get in a town this size.
Yeah, you get some huge names down there.
Yeah, I've seen some big names down there. Right, and your genre of music is?
Well, I guess you would say progressive rock. My day job is I play with Carl Palmer from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. So I've kind of fallen into the genre.
I found that fairly stunning. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
How long have you been with them?
I've been playing that show since 2004. First time we played the Narrows with that show was in 2011, and coincidentally, that show is where I met my wife. She was promoting the show,
you go.
And I now live here. So it's because of the Narrows that I live in this area.
Where do you live?
I live in Dartmouth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Know it well, obviously.
Yeah.
And who are you appearing with at the Narrows this next time?
So this time, I've written during the pandemic. I wrote a load of music, and one thing that I wrote was a soundtrack to the 1922 movie Nosferatu, the first ever vampire movie.
Which is certainly really pandemic.
Exactly,
I mean,
yeah. Well, yeah.
I've seen that movie.
Yeah.
More than once.
Yeah, an absolute classic. Yeah, well, funnily enough, it was released in 1922, but the last pandemic we had was the Spanish flu, which was 1918 to 1920.
Absolutely.
So it was just out of that. So it really mirrors our time to be doing this event now, because we've just come out of the next pandemic, or the most recent pandemic. But yeah, so what I've done is I've written a score which is scored closely to the action on screen. It's a full rock or prog band score. So there's going to be a full four-piece band there playing along with the movie.
That is nice. How long? And it lasts as long as the movie.
It's a 90-minute movie. Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, you know, the premiere back in 1922 of Nosferatu, they had a huge costume party at Berlin Zoo to open.
I've seen the movie, but I didn't know that.
Yeah, to open for the premiere, and reportedly this costume party and premiere cost more than the movie cost to make. So it was a grand opening. So we're hoping to do something similar. Everyone, we're encouraging costumes. There's going to be prizes for best costumes.
And what's the date on that?
So it's 29th of October.
All right, so you're sliding right into Halloween.
Exactly.
Good choice.
The Saturday before Halloween, yeah.
What time?
Yeah. Doors open at 7 p.m. Event starts, the music starts at 8 o'clock.
Tickets at the door?
Tickets at the door, or you can go to nosferatulive.com, or you can go to the Narrow Centre for the Arts website.
All right. I think as I said, I've seen the movie more than once, and it's always been very interesting to me because in terms of especially like where we live now, when you watch movies and there's so many special effects and pixelated things, and if you look at the movie itself, in terms of how we live now, the production values suck.
Right, yeah.
They do. It looks like two guys built the scenery over a long weekend while drinking beer, and the makeup is crude, and yet it's a great movie.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And it's creepy as hell,
yeah.
And you can't take your eyes off of it.
Well, one of the reasons why we have such poor copies of it, I mean, they've been restored to as best as they possibly can, but one of the reasons why it looks crude compared to, say, Chaplin movies of the era is because it was actually banned and all copies of it were ordered to be destroyed. The Bram Stoker estate, in particular his daughter, sued and ordered all copies of the movies to be destroyed. Thankfully, there were a few surviving copies.
I didn't know that. That's fascinating. And of course, the intergenerational forever fascination with vampires continues.
Yeah.
My wife will watch anything with vampires.
Right.
She watches so much vampire stuff that I always jokingly say, they say you can't kill them. I said, turn me loose on one of them. I'll kill them dead because I put up with them so much. But sometimes I can get into it. How do you write a score for something like that? What's the process?
Well, I started off, and I think we're going to hear a bit of this piece of music in a bit, but I started off with the final scene. So the final scene, and actually, interestingly enough, the final scene for this movie, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but sunlight plays a large role.
Yes, sunlight is important, yes.
But that is really the first time in the whole vampire mythology that a vampire dissolving in sunlight came into being. It was for that movie. In the book Dracula is weakened a little in the sunlight.
But they have to kill him.
But they've got to drive a stake through his heart. Exactly. Yeah. So I started off with that final scene. I wrote a piece of music called Sunlight Sonata.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of play on words.
Okay.
And then I kind of worked backwards. So I was introducing segments of that theme throughout the film, and worked backwards from there. But
it's an interesting way to do it.
Yeah. Well, certainly it builds to a climax.
But you start with creative work. I mean, you start where you start. You know, I was a hack newspaper man for 40 years, but I've written and sold fiction, and the process is just, it is inexplicable. And I'm assuming it's the same way with music. Well, why did you write this? I don't know.
Right,
I've started stuff at the end and at the beginning and at the middle, and I've started at the beginning and not known where the hell the end was.
Yeah, right, yeah. Certainly when you're creating a story or a piece of music not based on anything else, Yeah, it's funny. It's those ideas can come whenever. The ideas can come whenever, and so I have a huge bank of ideas on my phone, hundreds of voice memos on my phone that then at a later date I can sit down and craft them and turn them into full pieces of music.
And I've asked this question of musicians I've interviewed before, and I've gotten various answers. Do you hear it in your head before you've ever played it? Or do you, and I've had guys tell me, until I play it, it's not there.
Oh, right, yeah.
But I've also had guys tell me, I knew what it was.
Yeah.
I knew when I sat down, I just had to play what I'd been hearing.
For me, it can come in any way. So for me, I'll hear something really clearly in the shower, or I'll copy a bird song, or I'll take a bit of a car reversing. You know, anything can spark an idea. Or I can sit down with a guitar and find some chords that work together. Yeah. So it really depends. For me, it's different every time.
And it's usually a fascinating project. I mean, fascinating to when you get inside somebody's process. We all know of Yesterday being written as scrambled eggs.
Right, yeah.
And you know, you hear something like that, and it sounds foolish at first, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. That's how you get the tune. Tune first, words first. You know, there's so much. Yeah. There's so much going on in there. Yeah. That one of my favorite stories is Little Richard, who's a favorite musician of mine. He went in the studio to cut his first record, and he stunk. And so the guy who was producing took him out for a drink. Figured he'd loosen him up. Took him to a bar. There was a piano. Little Richard started playing the song that became Tutti Frutti, which he had sung in gay bars, and the lyrics to it were filthy.
Right.
Just like filthy, extremely sexual, but it had something. Right. And they went back to the studio and wrote a bunch of nonsense lyrics, but kept the performance and the tune and the level. Right. But the original Tutti Frutti would have gotten him arrested almost anyway. You know? And so, you know, that the creative process is a fascinating thing, and it's not normal. Other people don't think like you do. Right, yeah. Yeah, definitely, I think it's definitely something that can be learned, and it's something that can be practiced, you know. Again, the mystical part of it is that seed of an idea. Right. It's the, I've heard David Lynch, the director, talking about it as, it's a bit like fishing. You just put your hook in the water, and you wait for an idea, and you can't force an idea to happen. Yeah. But once you have that idea, then you can craft it. That's when the learned process comes. Once you have an idea. And sometimes they fail you. Yeah. Oh, yeah. One of the things I'm in addition to this, I don't do daily newspaper anymore, but I'm a syndicated newspaper columnist, and one of the hardest things I ever had to learn as a columnist was how to throw away an idea that wasn't working. Right. I need to go 750 words, and when I first started, I would get 300 words in, and it should have been obvious to me, this isn't going to last for 750, or this isn't a very good idea. But I would keep going and do something inferior because I didn't want to waste the idea. And it was hard for me to get to the point where I could say, no, get rid of it. Yeah. Blow everything off the screen and think of something else. Yeah. You know? Yeah, well, the great songwriters will tell you that 1 in 10 songs that they write is okay. 1 in 100 songs is a great song. You know, and they don't know. No. You don't know when you can do it and when you can't. That's right, yeah. And sometimes you don't know when you've got a great song, because a lot of the things I write and just think, it's okay. Well, you live with it here. Yeah, exactly. And so you're looking at it, and you can see all the warts and craters and pimples and stuff. And somebody else who's here looks at it and says, geez, that's good. Yeah. And you think, what? I've been screwing around with this for 6 months. Yeah. You know, and it's not getting any better. Like, it can't be any better. It's fine. And you think, really? You know, I did it, huh? Yeah. Yeah, so I'm fascinated by a soundtrack to Nosferatu. That's a tremendously interesting idea. How long did it take you to do start to finish, if you know? I don't know. Hundreds of hours, certainly hundreds and hundreds of hours. But it was something I was working on over the pandemic. I write a lot. I have a Patreon page, and we do live streams every week on there. And on one of the live streams, I pledged that I'm going to write a song in an hour from start to finish. Right. So a lot of the ideas grew out of those.
I've done that. I don't know if I write any of the Nosferatu stuff in an hour, but
No, that particular time. Did you meet your own
oh,
challenge?
I do it every week. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
In fact,
That's hard business.
about a month ago, I did a 10-hour live stream where I wrote 10 songs in 10 hours.
And then slept for 10 days. Is guitar the only instrument you play?
It's the only instrument I play well.
Okay.
I dabble on other things, yeah.
I've very seldom met a musician who just played one thing.
Right, yeah.
Most of them.
Yeah.
And they'll all say the same thing. You
Yeah.
know, I'm a drummer, but I can play piano a little
Sure,
bit,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And or they'll tell you I can do this well enough that I could work in a bar band doing that, but I'm not. What I'm really good at is this.
Yeah.
Talent is a very mysterious thing. I knew a guy once, and it was a number of years ago. There was a bluegrass artist named Jimmy Martin.
Right.
And this guy got in a band with him, and he said to me, he said, I went to Juilliard. I was the piano player in the band. He said, and Jimmy Martin, he said, was a fat, drunk, illiterate redneck. He said, and he blew me out the door every night.
Right.
Musically.
Yeah.
He said, if you played Beethoven on the piano, which he'd never heard, he said he could play it back as bluegrass without taking a breath.
Yeah.
And he said, I consider myself a fairly talented musician. I made a living at it for 20 years. He said, couldn't touch the guy.
Yeah.
He said, and that's when I learned that there's a leap of talent that you can cross or you can't.
Yeah, there are musical phenomenons. I've certainly know a few of them. I've come across a few of them, and you realise no level of schooling, no level of practice could ever get
all
you
that stuff
to
helps.
It does, but it doesn't. There's a rewiring, and there's a different wiring in their brain.
Yeah.
I remember a guy.
I was going to say, who do you remember for that?
I remember a guy who just, I don't know if he was homeless, but he just kind of came in off the street to a rehearsal place where we were in the UK, sat down at a piano and started, just said, asked me to play anything. So we'd say, the latest pop hit, and straight out. And then we start stretching him, and I like Rachmaninoff Third Piano Concerto, straight out, and he'd never played this stuff before, but if he'd heard it once, he could play it.
He could play it.
And you hear the stories of Mozart like that, and it's not schooled. It's
Paganini, people who had some.
Yeah, it's a different gene, or maybe on the autism spectrum, there's the autistic.
There's stuff going on in the human brain that nobody can figure out.
Yeah.
So when are you going back out with ELP?
With ELP, we start a tour in mid-November.
Where are you going?
We start off in Philadelphia. Closest we're going to get to here is Boston. We're going to play the Wilbur in Boston.
Boston's a good concert.
Yeah, on the 27th of November. Yeah.
So, and you've been touring with somebody for a hell of a long. You were with the Alan Parsons Project.
Were you
with them? Did I read that?
We've played shows with them. I didn't actually. We've toured with them. Yeah, we toured with lots of bands on the same bill. Toured with Yes and Alan Parsons and Todd Rundgren. Yeah.
There's got to be. I mean, I'm not asking you to tell tales. You always hear the backstage stuff. The drugs and the groupies and stuff. But there's also got to be, I would imagine, a fair amount of musical trading in that kind of group. People playing with each other they haven't played with before. Is that kind of thing going on?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and lots of swapping of ideas and. Yeah, definitely.
Or just kind of watching somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, trying to steal their licks.
Well, I
sure.
I went to college, but I learned how to write what I wrote for newspapers mostly by figuring out which of the guys in the room were better than I was, and then reading their stuff.
Yeah.
So I could do it like that, and I think everybody does that.
Yeah.
You learn how to work on construction sites by watching the older guys. They'll at least show you how to do it with a little less effort than you might normally.
Yeah.
They know how to screw around and not get caught.
Yeah.
It's interesting to talk to you about talent. I have no musical talent at all. I mean,
Right.
It's actually a negative.
Right. You know, I always say my musical talent is the fact that I just got passionate about it. I just fell in love with it, and I just didn't want to do anything else. That is. If people say, "Oh, you're so gifted," my gift is that my passion for it, and just wanting to spend all my time doing it.
Yeah, I think whatever propels you to play all the time.
Yeah.
Is even if you're not getting paid for it, or
Yeah.
to people who, you can call it practice if you want,
Yeah.
but it's playing.
Yeah.
And I think that people who, if you give them a little free time when they don't have to do anything, the guy who's going to play piano is more likely to become proficient at it. Hey,
Yeah,
what do you-
exactly, yeah.
There's nothing to do today. I don't have anything to do.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if you're sitting at home with nothing else to do, just playing guitar, trying to learn a song,
Yeah.
that indicates the passion that you're talking about, is that you want to do it so much
Precisely. Yeah.
that you do it.
Yeah.
You don't, okay, I got to wait until it's time to do it. I've always believed as a writer that inspiration, the notion of inspiration, is bullshit.
Right.
Sit down and start to do it. Something
Yeah.
will come to you.
Yeah.
You're not gonna do it if you're not doing it.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about doing it, isn't doing it. You might as well sit down and write something that's junk, because maybe it'll get better.
Oh, yeah.
If you keep working at it.
And also, you practice creating as well. You know, you don't just practice your instrument. You practice writing on your instrument, or you practice writing text. Or
You want it,
whatever.
yeah. It's like learning another language. You want to learn how to do it fluently.
Yeah.
You know, that how long is it going to take me to write this? Yeah, when you start, it's 3 hours. When you're 10 years into your career, it's 20 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you've learned the language.
Yeah.
You've learned how to do it.
Yeah.
As I said, I have no musical talent at all, but musicians fascinate me.
Right.
They always have. Because I have no idea how you do that.
Right.
In the first place, I'm very clumsy. I'm not very, and a lot of musicians I've known, I'm thinking of one guy I know who's a good bass guitar player, but ties his own flies, can do a fair amount of car repairs.
Oh, I see,
and
right.
like sometimes that hands-on that you do with a guitar or with a piano carries over to other stuff too, I think.
Right.
Sometimes.
Right.
But nothing is ever in a straight line, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, we're going to play you out of here with a little more of your music.
Fantastic.
All right, want to give them a little more? All right, thanks for giving us a half an hour, man. That
Thank
was
you.
nice.
It's a
Giving me,
pleasure.
not only some information about your next show, you've written a score to the old non-talkie movie Nosferatu, which 1922 vampire
1922,
movie.
the original.
So Saturday, October 29th, the Narrows Center. in Fall River. Great venue, great idea that you had, and
Thank you.
some good music. Grab yourself a 6-pack of craft beer and go down and watch the movie and hear a soundtrack that I'm sure helps bring it to life a little more.
I hope so. I did a trial run of this. I did a solo show, just me on my own, and there were people jumping in their seats because I've timed the hits with the vampire.
Oh, okay,
like that,
okay,
so,
yeah. Which was kind of the notion of the piano players that they would have in silent movies who would do bon dun dun dun, when something happened.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, probably not quite as hokey, but the same
yeah.
general. Well, obviously, it's a soundtrack. It has to go with the story and the action on the screen. All right, thanks again.